What really could Mars be in quote unquote astrology, end quote, other than what we're currently perceiving it to be, or other than what we've been told it could be, aside from the wigwash mainstream astrology within, its newspaper filaments? What else, like on a realistic level, could Mars be? Because we're growing in to new intelligence that's not necessarily new, it's new to us, that already was working on a different rate, because we don't know when, the different aspects of the planets were born on a time chronological level. So maybe we do. It's just like, what is it really the cost to be a human? Because as we misunderstand what the human is, it's a technology, it's a human technology, and it has its pros and cons. It has its pitfalls, and it has its rises, and it has its forgotten purposes, and it has its different purposes. Because the human at large, it could just be a big experiment to compensate like a different alien war, most respectively. And that's just, it's a possibility. I'm not saying that's the end all be all. I'm just saying, like, we don't really know what the human experiment is for, but we kind of do, because we have clues, and we don't really know what the human entails. But you might already have all the spiritual powers and all the cities that they're talking about. You already have them all. They're already inside of you. They're just at a state of dormancy, and the state of unravelment is based on your previous energetic responsibilities that you've overtaken, dharma, and undertaken. And all the cause and effect energy, all the energy cause and effect transactions of different outlets and inlets of how things have a cause and effect transaction, quote unquote energy karma, end quote. So you already have all the spiritual powers and all the cities. They're already inside of you. It's just waiting on the potentiality for them to awaken, and for how they're harmonized. Because obviously, like, each human is an expression of the potentiality of those cities flowering in infinite diverse ways. And I say infinite diverse ways because you could be on a polarization where, of course, by some light energy and dark energy of the mind, body, and soul, they get activated. No shit. But like, if it's coming from a place of polarization and detriment, and without the certain harmony principles, then the city and the spiritual power in itself, it won't sustain and maintain on, like, different platforms, on like a multifaceted level. Because obviously, like, for you to have optimal modern spiritual powers, they have to be balanced, harmonized, respectfully, duh. And they have to, like, more or less, they should be able to go in different places. It's not just subject to one place. Because look at, quote unquote, all these Indian states can have all these superpowers, but like, they're not necessarily like in the new American grounds, the frontier grounds, for them to like be appropriated, for them to kind of like more or less be in balance and alive and teach the spiritual powers in America. Because they have to go through different stargates, because it's a as above so below, within, the earth being as below to, a particular, galactic outline, respectively, end quote. And within that, they're still going through stargates throughout their human lives, because where we're born, that's the stargate where we left off. So with that being said, we don't necessarily know what like Mars could be either. For it costs to be human. And for us wanting to sign up to be human, eventually the Mars thing, based on what we are genetically and karmically, and I guess motivationally, I guess you could say, like a passionate mentality. Um, all those things that predicate where we how we flow with the planets, how we're like, growing with the planets, how much like harsh effects or not harsh effects we have with the planets. Because all humans, whether they know it or not, we're all going through the trials of these planets, and we're misunderstanding the planets. And I just want to talk about Mars real quick, because we don't necessarily know what Mars could really mean. Like, all the planets have their own aspect of like a political nature. Like, they're all like something of a political nature within the material realm of living. And that material realm of living, we don't necessarily know, like, the planets within them going out of the constellations of their of their, of their birthplace. Because the constellations, you could look at the constellations like the child to the house maybe, and the planets are like, like a consciousness that was observed, that, self, animated itself between and above and below the house and the constellation. So you could say the planet is above and below the house and the constellation respectively, with a different, understanding of it. You know what I'm saying? And within all of that, so like the planets themselves, they're like agency heads, and they've collected from, their travels and the travels within others. They've collected their own principal definition of what they're doing as far as their own agency. So within what could Mars really be then, Mars could be like an agency for like to settle indifference. Mars could be like an agency for like, seeing the showcase diverse expression of how civilizations are like built, and how the civilizations war against each other, and how strategy in itself is accumulated. There's like this strategic element of like within like the war play, within, I guess how like, there could be like different types of war fronts, not necessarily planetary civil war. There could be like, planets versus planets, just as an example. So Mars could be that agency for that. And since that's happening on a material level, but our awareness is not necessarily with that, but we're growing with that whole field, because Mars is a part of the whole solar system, and we're inside the solar system. So that theme is more or less growing inside of every living being in the solar system, because we're affected by that agency. So what could Mars really mean? And for some reason, I got 15 minutes on this doc. I only spoke like 6.5. But what could Mars really mean on a material, mundane, day-to-day level that's relevant to you? Well, there's wars going on. And within all the wars going on, what Mars could really mean? It could mean the accumulation and like this, and the realization, and the different, going in and out of the settlements of how, strategy is formulated and accumulated, and how like, in a different, deeper perspective, if God is doing everything, then God's ultimately the one that, positioned and input that big macro integer variable of Mars being on like the forefront of the material reality. So Mars is something like a frontier. It's a forefront. It's a frontier of strategy. It's a forefront of strategy. It's a forefront of material conquest, if you will, and seeing how that's playing within the parties of a higher council. And we're just kind of like, we're just on a unique rung that's, getting the micro reflections and expressing that on a micro level, So what could Mars really mean even more so? It's an evident self-relative theme of life that's happening, and we don't necessarily know that's what it's that's how we could classify, all this material conquest war stuff. We're not necessarily knowing that could be like, attributed to Mars. But here's another big side note, or keynote, or whatever. If God is the controller of all things, then ultimately on one stance level, God initiated and allowed and, positioned and configured all the planets to be where they're at, and shout out to everybody, decoding 5th Canto Bhagavatam. Good for you guys. But like, grounding it into like a modern neutral Western mentality. And obviously all the mentalities have their pitfalls and their rises and their pros and cons. No shit. We're looking at the essence of the neutral experiment and the purpose of the neutral experiment. So it's not about bashing, I'm better than you, my God's better than you. No, that's kindergarten shit. That's petty shit. That's like so fucking outdated. Please stop that right now. That has nothing to do with the real fucking things that need to be focused on and paid attention to. So please stop that. Like when I hear like these arguments, oh, my God's better than your God, who's the more superior God? That's so like irrelevant to me. It's been irrelevant to me, but sorry, that's just a side rant. But because I people don't realize how long I've been like observing like all the trends and the themes. Like y'all could just assume, but like you never know like what someone has really done materially or spiritually, or like I guess somewhere in between that, right? So how Mars got positioned from creator to do that. The Earth is on a material level, you could postulate that Mars could be the most material surface level like agency there is. And right before Mars is Earth, the womb, the natural matrix. And within that womb, we're all on that womb, and all of that womb is receiving like all of the agencies simultaneously, and within that, we're within the experiment matrix of Mother Earth. We're being led to like see what our human will go towards as far as the different many imbalances of the planets, and as far as the many different balances of the planets. And that's a fucking lifelong journey if you read between the lines, because you could be like principle and balanced in one planet and like imbalanced in a whole different planet. So what is that going to do for your life? You're going to be special at something, but as you go through life and something else is calling for you and something else is trying to teach you something else, then it depends how detrimental or not detrimental you are with the planet that you're exalting as a specialty. Life itself as a grander neutral solar system theme is going to test you for you to keep learning stuff, for you to be possibly balanced with all the planets, regardless if you have an arrogant detrimental ego or a modest constructive ego. You're still gonna life is still gonna teach you stuff. Like that's an inevitable fact, We're like, so the whole point here is like life is like kind of like assessing and examining on a neutral level how balanced or imbalanced is our human with how we're growing into the themes of the planets, and how ironically on a different, accelerative rate, they're growing as well, but their level of time is different. They're more like, paradoxically, they're more slower, but they're seeing everything faster. And we're more faster and we're seeing everything slower, and we're more faster because we're in the melting pot. We're in the diversity mix, we're in our individuation of diversity. So within that, Mars is kind of principal strategy. It's like, on an exalted balance level, and that principal strategy could be corrupted because Mars has, all the planets have like, something of like a shadow theme, or a detrimental theme for more clarity, or an exalted theme, using it in a constructive outlet. So within Mars being in Libra right now, excuse me, I just woke up and, liquids first, right? Or something like that. Celery greens. So, I only got 3 minutes on the stock. So with Mars being in Libra, it's kind of seeing like, the principal strategy and where we're being forefronted, and how we could see how nature is being, balanced, and how nature is being exploited, and how nature is being exploited. We could see how it's been spoiled, and to see how it's been spoiled, we feel that even if we're numb to that, we could collect the material energy, Mars, collecting material energy, Mars, to know that something is being spoiled on a natural level, Mars in Libra. So within Mars being in Libra, kind of having an aspect to Earth and Pisces, what is that? Some type of quincux or something. So we got 7th to 12th. So it's something like, I think it's a 120 degree angle, perhaps. I think it's called a quincasi. Excuse the terminology, but within that, there could be like, from misunderstanding comes real real abstract solutions, real solutions that never been done before. Like how there's those aspects of Libra to Taurus, that 120 degree, that contrast and that abstractness, that's where like the creative solutions could come from. So like Libra and Pisces, Mars and Libra, Earth and Pisces, that's some type of connection of mutable water trying to connect with like cardinal wind. So the cardinal wind is like a communication agency of how Venus is like stationed there, and beyond Venus is the whole collective solar system, and how Venus is an agency for reproduction, respectively, hospitality, respectively, different relationships, respectively. So, Venus is all up in the mix. So these planets are wearing different costumes aside from their main principal aspects that they have. And these planets have been the same, beings in every civilization. They're just taking on different translations. For me to reiterate, a last point from the last video. So what can Mars really mean? It could mean like, where the material evolution needs to go for conflict resolution to happen. Because like on the planet Mars, if you're going to resonate to go there, then you're fighting for some sort of like, you're in like God's strategy without realizing it, polarized, and you're trying to find your own strategy, because ultimately God put Mars where it's at for it to compensate a higher, bigger picture beyond this solar system and beyond this galaxy, you know? So I'm also looking at Earth as like the womb, and the Earth is in like the Pisces constellation. So the Mother Earth womb is in the field of like Neptunian stuff, Jupiterian stuff, old like ritual stuff, looking at Jupiter as like ritualistic stuff, looking at Neptune as something as like a cosmic news reporter. And then in between those is like, early Saturn, just like the early, or like even beyond Saturn, early Uranus, where there's like there's like a early documentation of just the deeper